What do you call a time traveling cow with a PhD? Hi, I'm ZGALA the Art Angel, and this is the Authentic Action Podcast. Today you're in for a treat because we're going to talk about time travel, everybody's favorite topic, right? Um, I've been thinking a lot about how we haven't quite figured out how to time travel in the sense of the word that most of us think of, like being able to skip quickly far back or far forward in time. But we do know how to experience time at different speeds, which is almost the same thing, only different. So I've been sort of obsessed with a lot of my life, actually, with how to squeeze more quality out of the time that I have. So when I was very young, I actually didn't care at all for having more quantity of time. I was perfectly happy to die young and and in fact embraced that idea because I equated squeezing a lot out of life with not having a long time to do all those things in due to various lines of songs probably and also just being part of Gen X, which has now become notorious for being, risk-taking sort of neglected generation. um and I am certainly a classic Gen Xer in those kind of ways, but um part of that classic way is that I was raised by a hippie mother who instilled a lot of fantasy belief in me. And so I've been contemplating the idea of time travel um, as long as I can remember, really. And I have also been noticing since sometime in my early teens how time seemed to be speeding up. And then I've had many, many iterations of realization about how my own experience of time continues to change. So when I was like the first one that I can remember being aware of was in my probably mid-teens. I was probably 14 or 15 when I got that clear sense that things were speeding up and thought about the future and thought, "Oh my goodness, I wonder how fast time is going to seem to be going when I'm older if I live to be older," which it was part of my equation at the time for like, why bother getting older? Let's just better to burn out than fade away was one of those song lines that I used to repeat. And then I nearly died when I was about 17 and had one of those experiences where time slows down profoundly and you can have your whole life flash before your eyes, as they say. It's actually somewhere behind my eyes, I think, where mine was flashing. But um, I'm not the I've heard other people experience this or describe experiencing this, so I know I'm not the only one to have experienced this by any means, but I did experience it for the first time then. I've had some other experiences where time slowed down, but when you're really sure that you're going to die, frequently is one of those times where time not only can you experience a whole lot of memory in a short amount of time, but the seconds that tick by, or the fractions of a second that tick by during those um, often just a few seconds or minutes can can seem like an eternity. And it reminds me of the way that time changes when we're in a dream. And one of my favorite fantasy series that I was exposed to when I was growing up was the Narnia series, where the main characters go often through a closet or a painting or some sort of a portal into another universe or world where time is experienced at a different rate. And um, all of these things culminate to me thinking a lot about time. And, well, I'm about to have my 54th birthday. It's about to be the new year. And so it is just a good time to think about time, right? Um, yeah. And in doing that, I came to some realizations recently, as I have many of these iterations of contemplation at time. And my most recent realization, which is again just another iteration of a realization I've had before, was about how you can't speed up and get more time. In fact, the faster you try to get through time, the faster it seems to go by and the less of it you get, if that makes any sense. And when I am going really fast on my snowboard, for example, or driving really fast, it's like my frame rate um, gets brought, like I'm fitting more space in the time, but I'm actually experiencing less of that time in the time. Bear with me, stick with me, because I know that sounded a little bit muddy, but as I mentioned before, the near-death experience and where time is slowed down, and we've all also experienced the time flies when you're having fun phenomenon, right? Like that's a phrase, that's a cliche catchphrase that we're all familiar with because it's true, because we've all experienced that where you're having a good time or you're really super focused and time just flies by. And I've done a lot of research into flow state, and that's one of the intriguing things that's led people to research flow state is how people's perception of time changes. And in my own research and dabbling with like microdosing of psychedelic mushrooms in order to enhance my ability to achieve flow state while snowboarding, doing like as a whole like little equation. It's not just one thing in my experience that leads to flow state, but it's lining up a flow state cycle along with the right biochemistry and the right set of circumstances where I'm challenging myself just a little bit beyond my current ability. And for me, snowboarding on the top of a mountain in extreme weather on a little microdose was like the perfect balance of those equations to put me in a state of flow state or a that was redundant, I recognize, in a state of flow that I hadn't consciously experienced before. Now, there's a good chance that I've unconsciously experienced it many times, just like as a child being in that state. But this was the first time that I had deliberately set out to try to achieve that and track it and keep, you know, keep reflecting on whether it was working or not. And when I did that, I was pretty much astounded to find that I 10x'd is what now 10x is a generalization. I didn't actually have any measurement for 10x, but I was able to snowboard a part of the mountain that I had never been able to snowboard before with like I've been able to snowboard it before only by what they call grinding an edge on the snowboard and just sort of getting down that part, trepidatiously, carefully. And after taking that microdose and setting that intention, I described it as experiencing more time within time so that I was able to navigate the same terrain I had been on many times before with just a profoundly higher degree of competence and confidence. And then I tried it with a friend of mine, gave him a dose of that. And he was, I'm talking about a microdose, like a 10th or 20th of a gram, not even enough to really feel, but then to just notice these enhanced effects. So I know that was a lot to digest there, so just kind of put that in a container for now. And the point of all that is just to say that I personally have experienced many different rates of time for a myriad of different reasons, from just being sad or happy to being, in a intentionally set and chemically enhanced state of flow, or being in a near death experience, all of those extremes and everything in between. And whoa, sorry about that. From all those experiences, I just kicked the camera, I made it shake. I can attest with my personal anecdotal experience that time changes, how the speed of time changes. And I'm babbling about this because I know I'm not alone in this experience. And I've talked to many other people and I've read lots and there's been lots of research. And so I just keep thinking about this because in business, it's very common to hear the expression that we all have the same amount of time in the day. And and it's often used as try to use as sometimes like as a shaming technique for why aren't you doing more like all the people who've done the most have been able to do with their day, or it's usually intended to be used as a motivational technique to help us see that we could be doing more in our day because other people have achieved more and we have the same amount of time that they have, so couldn't we do more? And here's the thing about that statement or that way of thinking is it's flawed, and it's like a way of shaming ourselves and each other. And not only that, it's just aimed in the wrong direction. The more I think about it, the more I see that while time management is a great skill to develop, and I'm not trying to say it's not relevant or important at all, but what I am saying is that much more relevant than time management is energetic management. Your energetic frequency, your state of mind, where you're at, determines how you're experiencing the speed of time. That leads me to want to mention the book that I'm working on still and is almost completed called The Shift. And one of the many iterations of this book I've been working on was the 2-minute tool book. And that's because I have been focused on how there are practical tools that we can learn, skill sets that we can develop to help us live better lives, basically, or live lives that we love more, which is one of my big aims. And the book, The Shift, is really focused on emotional regulation and how to develop a toolkit for achieving better emotional regulation. And that is because of this time experience factor that I'm going on about now. Because if you can get that emotional regulation piece, if you can master recognizing when you're not in an optimal frequency, now I say optimal frequency, and I want to give you a little pinky finger asterisk to say what is the optimal frequency is going to vary depending on your goals, depending on the totality, the balance of your day. So there's not just one, like you don't want to be at the fastest speed all the time and you don't want to be at the slowest speed all the time, right? There's there's times when you're probably going to want to experience time faster, and there's times when you're going to want to experience it slower. But wouldn't it be awesome if instead of just having it zip by without you realizing it when it's going faster, you could slow it down and experience more of it, like I was kind of describing with the microdose experience I had with snowboarding, so that I was able to perform at such a higher rate and have a higher degree of memory, like a higher frame rate, basically, and a higher degree of consciousness and awareness. Or, um, sometimes like every night, we go to sleep, we dream, we experience time at a completely different rate. Sometimes you could experience like what seems like a whole lifetime in one night's sleep, and other times you go to sleep for 8 hours or whatever it is and wake up and it seems like it was just a second ago that you went to sleep. So that's just yet another example of how there are all these different ways. And I am not claiming now or in my book, The Shift, to have mastered time in such a way that I can, teach you how to always control exactly the speed at which you experience time. But I am confident to say that there are definitely ways to deliberately slow it down and speed it up. And there are tools that I have learned and I'm continuing to learn and develop, and that you can probably learn and develop too, which could help you gain more control and awareness of how you are moving through time. And that is like, as the saying is that time is the most valuable asset, right? That there's such a limited amount of it. It's the one thing you can't get back. There's all of these sayings about it. And as I age, I'm more and more, you know, acutely aware of the truths of those sayings. And and I know I'm not alone in that. And if you're not already there or ahead of me in that, you're right behind me. So uh, get ready because it's coming. Um, yeah, so I think it's a topic worth contemplating and worth discussing, in part because of what I said a little bit ago about how it's a popular concept to say that we all have the same amount of time. And yet, when you really stop and think about it, we don't all experience time in the same way. And that is at least one of the reasons why we don't all accomplish the same amount of things in the same amount of time. And why, even just as individuals, we don't actually have access to our time in the same ways. And so learning to manage our emotional state, learning to re-regulate when we get dysregulated so that we can then intentionally get into that flow state cycle, so that we can intentionally take a deep breath, exhale, and bring our awareness into the present moment and just slow it down even a little bit. Adjust our frame rate just a little bit. Like if you're having a really great time, you're at your child's third birthday party and it's glorious and it's never going to happen again, to remember to take a breath, to take it in, to drink it in, to savor the flavor, and to slow time down a little bit in those moments, to increase your frame rate so that you can really take in more of that time, squeeze more time out of your time, or stuff more time into your time, however you want to think of it. I sometimes think of it both ways, and both of those analogies work for me. But again, I wanted to just stress that if you are trying to speed up, you're liable to decrease the amount of time that you're going to experience. And so the way to get more time out of your time, or experience more of the time that you are moving through, depending on how you want to look at it or think of it, is to slow down, is to bring your attention and awareness to the passing of time and to your sensing of time, and not to time itself, but to what's happening around you, bringing your senses to, what does it taste like? What does it smell like? What does it look like? What are you feeling like in that moment? Uh, all of those, what sounds are happening, what smells are happening. Paying more attention to those sensory details is going to help slow down your experience of time and help you both remember it better and also experience it more fully in the present moment. So it's also a technique to help re-regulate you, that paying attention to your senses if you're dysregulated, which often means you're basically just completely out of time, right? When we're dysregulated, we're just in that fight, flight, freeze, fuck, hold the light, in that state where we're sort of out of time, we're often time is racing by in those moments, but we are sort of stuck in a moment and not allowing ourselves to experience that present moment, but rather holding ourselves out of that moment, either in a projected future or a projected past. Um, Sometimes not without any storyline at all, but as a visceral, trauma response experience in the body, and other times as a narrated story response, which is then usually causing that visceral experience in the body. But I hope some of this is making sense because I am aware that I'm getting a little bit rambly. I did make some notes and then I completely went off my notes in typical fashion for me, but I wanted to dive into this topic because I've been thinking about it for over a week now. Well, and as I mentioned, off and on my whole life, but over a week with the intention of trying to make a podcast about it. And yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts about that are. If you want to share any of your own experiences with slowing down time or speeding up time, because I think if we all share that with each other, we might start to really get a more concrete sense of how true that is. Or maybe I will realize I'm wrong, and you can help me see that. That's fine too. I have thought about it a lot, and I do think that it's true that we experience time in at different speeds depending on our own energetic frequency. And as I mentioned, because I'm writing about some of that in my book, The Shift, in my upcoming book, The Shift, that is, it's been an exciting topic or arena of topics to contemplate this week. So, um, I'm looking at my notes now. I wanted to mention our sponsors. I meant to do that earlier and I didn't. So let me just pause and mention the Authentic Action Academy, where I am seeding a brand new community there for mostly for leaders, future leaders, teachers, and parents of neurodivergent humans and neurodivergent humans. I hesitate a little bit to say that because really we're just all working together on new ways of developing educational techniques and tools and practices. So if you'd like to join us over there in the Skool community, that's Skool, school with a K, you can find us in the Authentic Action Academy. And for, at least for right now, it is free to join. Eventually that might change. So come on over and check it out and join that community. There should be some courses there soon. And already there's some things happening. And our other sponsor is the Sleeping Dragons Company, my own dear creation of 25, 30 years now, where we specialize in phthalate-free fragrances and hard to find essential oils and unique essential oil blends and other self love and self-care supplies. You can find Sleeping Dragons Company over on Etsy these days at www.sleepingdragonsco.com. Check it out and awaken your creative spirit. Those are our sponsors, and I thank you if you do check them out. And I thank you if you check out the description and sign up for my email list, as well as give us a 5-star rating if you are watching this podcast somewhere where you can do that sort of thing. Leave me some feedback if you have any of that or question. I always love feedback and questions. Um, yeah, if you have an experience, a near-death experience where time slowed down that you want to share a little of or a lot of, or if you have, like me, contemplated the speeding up and the slowing down of time and you have any thoughts that you would like to add or have a conversation about, please do put that in the comments or hit me up with that commentary because I really am interested in this topic and continuing this conversation. I think it's something that's worthy of ongoing contemplation and reminder because again, even though I decided not to die young and to go ahead and live, and now I'm in my 50s, I am still determined to squeeze all the life I can out of this life. I'm highly passionate about living life fully and vibrantly and trying to help others in any way I can, discover ways to do that as well. That's what's behind my upcoming book, The Shift, and that's what's behind this channel and pretty much all, if not all, of the work that I do. So, um, yeah, this is an important conversation, an important topic to me. And I am, as I mentioned, actually really excited to have these epiphanies about the relationship between slowing down and getting more out of our time and the flow state relationship because I like going fast. And so that experience I had on my snowboard, and now I've had many of those, but that first time where I set that intention and was able to create that experience, which by the way, never went away as far as now the experience of the time happens more profoundly when I'm microdosing, which I don't do all the time, but the experience of being able to navigate the mountain stayed in my body. It was a very, very neat and delightful thing. And I've read a lot about flow state and about performance enhancement. And so I know that there's quite a bit of science behind this, building a growing amount of science behind flow state research. And if you're interested in that, I highly encourage you to look into it. One of the chapters of my upcoming book, The Shift, dives into different states of consciousness and the flow state cycle. And I intend to take that topic and dive more fully into it in a future book. But right now, I'm just introducing it in The Shift and hopefully here introducing it as well. And I encourage you to dive more into that if that resonates for you and rings any bells that you want to pursue right now. Um, yeah, I think with deliberate intention and sometimes with, I was going to say with chemical enhancement, but it's really about more understanding of our neurochemistry, which we can get at through external chemical enhancement. We can also, like all of the external, just actually is there to help catalyze internal chemistry. And it's really our internal neurochemistry, which is creating all of our experience of our experience, if that makes sense. The quality of our experiences and hence the quality of our time experiences or how much quality and quantity we are getting out of the time that we are alive. So again, to wrap it around to where I tried to start off about the idea that we all get the same amount of time. That may be true and isn't true because we all die at different amounts of time. But say we all have the same amount of seconds or minutes or hours in a day, though that may be true, we don't all experience it the same way. We don't even experience from day to day the same way. And we don't even experience from hour to hour in one day the same time. And if you start to really think about why that is or what makes the difference, it has to do with how much intention, how much awareness you're bringing. And also there's to some degree just a cyclical nature to it that isn't completely in our control. So I'm not trying to say that you can gain absolute control or that I have figured that out, as I said, but I do think we can gain more control over it and hence squeeze more quality and quantity out of whatever time we have to live in our given lives. My joke. What do you call a time traveling cow with a PhD? Dr. Moo. But I know. That's too silly. That's so silly. I got to tell you another silly one because I love the silly jokes and riddles. Here's a time traveling one that I ran into. And it goes, the punchline always comes before the joke. But what's the worst thing about telling time travel jokes? You're welcome. I'll see you next time. Ciao for now. Be good to you.